Opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Scarefest Radio, the radio you can see.
And hello and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Scarefest Television, the original broadcast date, November 11th, 2022. And in honor of our sudden and drastic weather change, I am dressed tonight in my lumber snack outfit. I am dressed appropriate for the weather and thought I'd just do it. I just didn't feel like it. So anyway, I did shower, though. I did shower because of my lovely co-host and my lovely guest. We'll start with Chad. We'll do Chad first. Hey, Chad, how you doing, buddy?
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Doing quite well, thank you. And everybody, he did not even notice that on tonight's promo banner, I used a new image of him that made him look all suave and debonair.
And fatter than normal. But hey, vision's what it is.
Well, you know, it's a photo. It is a photo, unretouched.
I know.
It is. It's so anyway. Now for our lovely one of my annual guests that I almost missed this year just because of and the other one, now for the record, the other one everybody's Felissa Rose, and she does conventions every weekend now. She's never home. So anyway, so Stephanie, it's your turn in the barrel, as we say here in Kentucky. And if I have to tell you that joke, then I can't do it on the air. Anyway. Oh, by the way, Chad, tell Monica happy birthday from the crew at Scarefest TV.
I will pass that along, and I'll tell her in case she's listening. Hopefully she is. Happy birthday, dear.
And if she's not listening, fuck her. I'm just in that kind of
recording.
Okay, everybody. Now, Stephanie comes on the show as a gifted and talented, we'll call her a psychic. I don't think that term offends you.
No, it doesn't.
Because you never know nowadays. You never know.
Right.
But she went off the rails. Just totally off the rails from what I know about her. But we're going to get the story. But this year, her speech, which is always well attended, at Scarefest, because, well, she's talented, she's lovely, and all that stuff. Apparently a gifted speaker, although I've never actually been to a single one of your seminars because I'm just a little busy bee. But the point is, this year it was about monsters. When monsters attack, exploring the strange history of cryptids in Kentucky. Now, I'm just going to ask you the same thing I told Chad I was going to lead with. What the fuck do you know about cryptozoology? Okay.
As much as anyone does at this point.
That's what he said!
I was trained as a historian, so I found all these stories while digging around and actually looking to research for another project I was working on. So they're all sort of older stories, most of them.
So, I mean, okay, now, without giving away spoilers or whatever, so you're just researching something and start coming across all these dreadful monster stories. Is that pretty much how it happened? I mean, were these newspapers you came across, books?
A little bit of all of it. A lot of them did come from newspapers, especially the ones where you start getting into ones with police reports involved. A lot of those did come from newspapers. But once I had a name or a date, I can look for books and things like that on it as well. So lots of weird sources for lots of weird events.
Some of them that were mentioned, I mean, although now some in your bio thing, I don't know anything about. But the one that just literally makes a piss down run down my legs, everybody, the Land Between the Lakes stories, because we're talking about werewolves. We're not talking about Bigfoot. We're not talking about little green men. We're talking about actual, honest to God, walk on 2 feet werewolves. What'd you think about the story?
I think by far of all the stories I found, the Land Between the Lakes stories were by far the best stories, but I had the hardest time finding anything to back them up. And there's several of them that I can find several versions of stories, but I can't find any primary documents. I can't find the newspapers. I can't find the death reports, things like that.
Now the story behind that I've been told by the American Dogmen Association is, of course, it was the original big report, I guess, was allegedly reported by a park ranger or something to that effect. Game warden, park ranger, whatever.
Yeah.
And so basically the Park Service or whoever's in charge sat on it pretty quickly. I don't know that it ever made the papers. It was just passed down as...
But even if it doesn't make the papers, you should be able to find records of the burials, of the deaths, of the autopsy. You should be able to find something.
Okay, well.
And that's the part that I was looking for and can't find. But it is by far the best story.
But if you ate them, there's no burial.
I've got a degree in anthropology. I spent quite a lot of time digging in holes for that degree. You can always find a little bit of something.
There's a finger or something. But
exactly.
Now, now as far as now I don't know how deeply you researched it, just to follow it up now. Did the Dogmen stories of Land Between the Lakes kind of die off with that, or are there still at least repeated reports going through the years?
There are still reports of things that people can't quite decide whether or not it's a strange looking Bigfoot or if it is actually a dogman. You get these reports of things crossing the roads, of things growling at tourists, of things chasing people. Tall bipedal, some of them have pointy ears, which seems to point more dogman than Bigfoot, but there's been Bigfoot reports in the area of Land Between the Lakes for as long as Land Between the Lakes have been there, so...
Cute story. We had National Dogmen Association on here. Now, they're anti-werewolf. It's cryptid.
Yes.
It's cryptid.
Yeah.
Except all of their witness photos, the thing's wearing pants. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like looking through these eyewitness police sketches and drawings and,
Yeah.
And I'm going, at some point, dude, you gotta call it a werewolf at some point. And, but they, because, well, I mean, it's stereotypical. It's kind of like if they draw Ghosted, it's a big sheet with a head. It's there comes a point where you just have to accept facts, and whether it's bull crap or not, you just got to accept the terminology. Chad, over to you.
Stephanie, it's a pleasure talking to you again. You're always a great guest, and I'm looking forward to learning more about this subject. But let's start out with a little bit of background. Like you mentioned your training as a historian.
Yes.
What has drawn your interest to kind of the paranormal, cryptid, supernatural side of history as opposed to a more traditional side?
So I saw my first ghost when I was about 1.5 years old that I know of. And as I got older and realized what was happening, when I got to college, I wanted to give myself context for what I was seeing. So in college specifically, I was looking to see other cultures, other people who had reports of experiences like mine. So I started giving myself context there. And then from there, it just sort of blossomed out from sort of traditional ghosts, psychics, that sort of very normal things, to things that are, side by side with it, but not the same. So you start getting into the more occult topics, the inhuman hauntings, and then inhumans lead to cryptids. And then I'm not sure where it goes from there, but that's just sort of how my research has sort of blossomed out from the inside out.
I know you've done lectures in the past on folk stories and traditional stories of Kentucky. So how did you kind of transition from that into cryptids? It seems like they're related, but different.
Well, when you start digging into things like the holler tales that I did a few years back, specifically going out and interviewing people who did live in the hollers and the stories that they were brought up with and the experiences that they had had, they're not ghosts. A lot of them are very much things that they believe to be flesh and blood, or that they were told were flesh and blood. You start going down this cryptid route of, if I've got ghosts here and I've got these other things that people are reporting, and I'm seeing the same reports from multiple people in multiple locations, how long until we start getting something that, from an anthropological lens, would be something true? So it really led from that, and then looking into the reports. Because one of the things I remember hearing about in those set of stories was these lizards, like lizard people, and just like reptile reports, strange types of lizards. But then I start digging into that, because I'm like, there's no way people have been reporting lizards. I found, going back 250 years, reports of 4 different distinct types of lizards in the Ohio River Valley, which is insane. But when you start hearing the story here, I find some back historically and find some really interesting stories, even if you don't want to call them actual historical events. So that's really where I started.
When you start looking at something like that, what kind of sources? I mean, I understand you're looking at newspapers and
Yeah.
books that may be out there, but how do you even know where to start to try to find related stories?
That's one thing grad school will teach you, is to dig, and how to dig, and where to look for sources of things. There's several databases where you can actually search newspapers, historic newspapers, by keyword. So looking for things like monster, looking for things like attack. I've done quite a lot of research in historic newspapers about vampires and finding vampire reports in them that way. You find fabulous keywords and you let them lead your search. That's how I found mermaids in the Ohio River Valley. You know.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to hear more about
Right?
that.
Mermaids
So
were
in the
very
river,
interesting.
or
In the river, yep.
Well, you don't think they
in
live on
Vevey,
land,
Indiana.
Chad. They're mermaids, for God's sakes.
well, they could live in a farm pond. I don't know, Wes.
Farm pod mermaids? How do you, I wonder? Just pull them in. The Ohio River ones were actually at Vevey, Indiana, and they sort of terrorized the small town and all of the people that were traveling on the river, basically attacking boats and coming at people. Thought to be very vicious there for a couple of years and then gone. But then you start seeing the actual like reports of what they looked like. These long, sort of leathery creatures with pointy ears and 4 legs and a tail. I tend to think that they were probably misidentified alligators, just from descriptions, but people had no context, so you ended up with mermaids in Vevey, Indiana. Because why not?
Wow. It's so interesting every time, like I said, I hear you talk about these things. I know, like you said, Tales from the Holler you did a few years ago. That was very interesting, because that's kind of my background into this too. Is my entire family's from Eastern Kentucky and grew up in a holler, and I grew up hearing those folk tales. So hearing your research on that and talking more about it was interesting, and I'm certainly interested to hear more tonight about the cryptid part of Kentucky's history.
Absolutely.
So you had mentioned you were working on another project when you got into this. Without giving anything away on the other project, because I know we're going to talk to you when that gets closer. Was this closely linked to that, or was it a tangent you found as you were researching something else and just kind of got distracted down this rabbit hole?
You might be onto something there. I was looking for a little more conventional cryptid, or a little more conventional high strangeness accounts. And I kept finding in Kentucky specifically all of these weird interactions between people and what they were calling cryptids or monsters, and literal physical attacks. And I fell down the rabbit hole hard. Like, I could not dig myself out of it. So I had to do something with this random pile of research I ended up with. So this is what happened.
Well, we're glad it did. We're coming up on our first break, though. Let's go ahead and toss to that, and then we'll be right back with Stephanie.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to talk to you tonight once again about BlueLeafNaturals.com. In particular, I am speaking about their Blue Relief Lotion. This stuff has saved my life in the past 2 weeks. Is it going on 3 weeks now? Oh my God. Scarefest, basically. I walked on concrete, which I'm not used to, by the way, for 4 days, 5 if you count Sunday twice, because we were loading up trucks till 11 p.m. that night. And so basically my left leg gave out left hip, my left knee. And so this stuff, I get up every day and I smear this stuff, especially on my knee. And this stuff works. I'm just going to tell you the theory behind it, or what I've Googled, didn't come from Blue Leaf. It came from just Googling it. But they seem to think that CBD kind of turns down the nerve endings. It may not give you complete relief of pain, but if you're dealing with chronic pain, if you're dealing with an injury or something like that, do try Blue Leaf Naturals Blue Relief Lotion. And of course, when it's on the screen, but BLU leafnaturals.com. And I think it's still on sale. So it's a good time to try it. And I highly, highly recommend it. I use it myself, as they say. Now, isn't that the neatest transition ever? Anyway, okay, let's go over a few things. Farm Pond Mermaids, welcome to Kentucky. Just gonna say it. Gonna go ahead and put that out there for everybody. That'll be the quote of the week. See, now I grew up in what we called hollers, but they weren't like these mountain hollers. These were like normal hollers. I lived on the hill, by the way. I was kind of upscale. The point is, all we had were ghost stories, though. Nobody saw anything. There were woods across from the houses. Lots of, we had, everybody claimed there was a bobcat in the neighborhood. I heard it one time, but, and that was it. No Bigfoot sightings, nothing like that. But we had some really cool ghost stories. But I do want to explain to you about lizard people. Now, I only know of two types. Generally, they're in Congress, and they're usually Republican or Democrat. And you can go on YouTube and read and hear all about it. So just so you know. Yeah, lizard people are very, very common. They run the government. They run the world, everybody. And they suck. They suck at it. Okay, now, I'm going to pull up your little thing here. What else did I want to hear about? Now, the Kelly Goblin attack. That's the one where we've decided that's aliens, haven't we?
That is the most common interpretation, is that it is aliens, yeah.
So, now if I remember the story correctly, it's really based around one family's experience, and they claim these little goblin creatures were like scratching on windows, throwing rocks, banging on doors, just gave them hell for a couple nights. And now there was police reports on that, correct?
There's a lot of police reports on that. The Kelly Goblin attack happened in the middle of the summer. It was a single family. It was a teetotaling family, so no alcohol involved. And the cops do attest to that. I checked on that part.
Yeah, but, okay, just going to throw it out there. If I'm familiar with the region, it probably wasn't alcohol. Just saying. Okay, go ahead.
Possibilities. Kelly's actually about 30 minutes away from where I grew up at, so I spent a lot of time down that way, just sort of poking around in the area that it actually happened at. But the home didn't have running water, so the first sighting of the night happened when one of the gentlemen went out to the well to get water in the middle of the summer afternoon. He and the other men were playing cards. The ladies and the children were just sort of messing around inside the house. He saw something fly across the sky, land in a field behind the farmhouse, and essentially freaked out because he thought it was a UFO and ran back to the house. Everyone made fun of him. Shortly after this, the dogs started acting strange and hid under the house and would not come back out for the rest of the encounter, essentially. And shortly after that, they started seeing little gray figures coming towards the house, about 3 feet tall, long arms, long legs, short torso, sort of clawed hands, but the most sort of defining feature of them were these goggle-like eyes and bunny-like ears. So they don't look like the alien you think of today, but a lot of people think that it might have been antennas and goggles on the alien as opposed to actually being, a physical feature of the creatures. But they then started attacking the house, and they had a shootout.
That is speciest. To say that all aliens have to look alike, I have to draw the line somewhere.
Of course.
Because, okay, well, the thing is, okay, I wonder when that part started where they were arguing over whether they looked like aliens or not. Because,
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I'm thinking back then they probably didn't have a lot of good reference points to go by.
Exactly.
But because I was now your opinion or did the newspaper accounts? I'm assuming some of this was the newspaper accounts. Okay,
Yes,
reading
very
it,
heavily covered.
looking at it, does it look like it was treated seriously?
The fact that they had the police reports and the reports from the local army bases, it was treated as an actual event on the night it happened. The newspapers oftentimes took sort of pot shots at them, but this family was terrorized. They ended up leaving the house never to return within about a week of it happening. It was enough to drive them off their property. This was not something that they did to make money. They did not make any money off of this. And some of the people that are still alive from where this happened, they're terrified. It reminds me a lot of people who were around during the Mothman sightings and how they reacted in life, just that sort of trauma around it. I believe that they had something traumatizing happen to them that night. I can't say specifically that it was aliens, but I believe that they believe something happened.
And in closing on that point, I'm just going to say, and anytime you read a story where the dogs hid under the house, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Mhm.
It's going to happen in Kentucky. I do want to, since I have been in the paranormal field, whether it's cryptozoology or ghost or whatever, I still think every story in the world, everything snakes back to Kentucky somehow. In your research, have you come to that conclusion also?
Everything comes back to things that connect here very easily. And it's really kind of strange how that works because the idea of the little green man actually comes from the Kelly Goblin encounter, the most famous description of an alien, but they were gray in the Kelly encounter, but Hollywood took it, the newspapers took it, they became little green men. So it's a whole thing. But all these weird things do seem to tie back here. And it kind of makes you wonder why Kentucky is so odd and why we do have so much phenomena in such a relatively small like square footage of the state.
Something to think about. Chad, over to you.
Just building on this a little, I know that there have been recent series out that talks a lot about Kentucky goblins.
Yep.
And
Briefly,
certainly
go
ties
ahead.
it to, yes, it does take a turn later, but I was wondering if as you were researching this you found any other interesting goblin type stories.
Goblins become sort of an odd category. In my mind, they're sort of a short reptilian sort of creature. But what I found were all sorts of reports of things in caves in Kentucky that seem to be about the same height and about the same demeanor. You find it all through Mammoth Cave. You can find it going back hundreds of years in Mammoth Cave. But from my personal experience, you find things like that down Bell Witch Cave and things in that sort of area, that sort of Tennessee, Kentucky border as well. It seems to be anywhere there's a cave in Kentucky, you can find reports of these little things or things being drawn into caves. That's specific to some of the holler tales I heard about short things leaving footprints and pulling things, dogs and things like that, into caves and essentially dispatching them there. So there seems to be this history of just really, really strange things happening in our caves.
I've always and certainly I grew up hearing stories like that too, so
Yeah.
I've always tied it more to like an elemental type occurrence.
Elemental or something like a fairy, things like that seem a little more logical to me just looking at the cultures that are involved. But the prevalence of things disappearing in caves and like Tommy knockers and all makes me very uncomfortable in this area just because of how often you hear that story, one too
Well,
often.
my house is right over top of one, so now I'll have to
Oh,
think about that tonight.
sorry.
What other stories did you come up with as you were researching that are kind of famously tied to Kentucky?
Well, one not so famous, but I think it should be, was the Green Claw attack. And that one actually took place the day before the Kelly Goblin attack in Henderson, Kentucky. So about an hour's drive from Kelly. And a family was out swimming and in the Ohio River, and one of the girls found herself being pulled under. She said it felt sort of hairy, the hand that grabbed her, but she said it felt like it had claws and hands and pulled her under. She was able to kick free, and then it pulled her under a couple of more times before someone was able to get her afloat. She was able to the creek, the creek, and we actually found scratches and mud, and underneath it there was actually a green mark on her leg that they said was sort of hand-ish shaped. The part of the story that you don't find as often, but has told by the woman who experienced it, was that there was a UFO sighting very shortly during the same day, and a gentleman knocking on her door later that evening telling her not to talk about it. And then several hours later, we suddenly have the Kelly Goblin attack, which happened too close for comfort in my mind.
Yeah, that's certainly a story I had never heard. So
Yeah.
It's surprising, especially with the proximity to the Kelly story, that it hasn't got more traction and more news.
Absolutely.
Did you find that these stories are centered in a certain location? Like you said, those are about an hour drive apart. Was there a geographical tie to a lot of these type stories? Or because I know also Land Between Lakes is towards the western part of the state too. So
yeah, it's not, those three are sort of in a straight line. I sort of see clusters in where the stories were coming from, but that could have just been where the better news reports were coming from. You're looking at areas that are slightly more populated. Just in that area, just had a little bit better record keeping, which is probably why we do have more stories from that area. The varmint actually came out of that area also, and that one I have firsthand reports of the creature being hunted as well. But then one of the other ones came out of Louisville, the Popelik monster. So you get things that are just where the sources are going to let these stories be remembered.
Did you find a lot of these types of stories? And I know we've already touched on the hollers and stuff. Did you find a lot of ties to Eastern Kentucky with cryptid stories, or so far we've talked mainly about Western part of the state?
Western and Central was easier for me to find, at least in the newspaper records and things like that. It seems like the far east you go, the spottier the newspaper records are, and the less mention you have of things that were completely fantastical. It was easier to find pertinent stories to the day, less easy to find things about, the monster up in the holler. So, don't know if it's a cultural difference or what, but there's definitely less that I was able to dig up.
And I think you touched on it there. I think it's probably a cultural idea of these things are kept inside the family as opposed to shared with newspapers and that sort of thing. We're getting pretty close to our next break. I'm going to go ahead and toss it to that, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Does everyone realize that the Spirit Mechanics, who have been a long-time supporter of this show, now have a brick and mortar location? You do not have to wait to go to the monthly mystical market. You can actually visit them at their physical store. It's off Newtown Pike, easy to get to. 1510 Newtown Pike, Suite 116. Basically, it's 2 lights down from the Clarion in the Griffin Gate Shopping Center. Now, even they're in with the Jeweled Phoenix, and even if you do not need their services, energy work, alchemy, Celtic witchcraft, I'm not going down the list. Even if you don't need their services, they got some great stuff in their store. And I was looking, we went to their grand opening and we saw some of the stuff. And we really couldn't, you can't tell in the store what's there, but apparently there's a dividing line in the store. And it's not hard to find out. But the point of this whole story is they got some of the coolest tarot cards that you will ever find. First of all, they have the Garbage Pail Kids Tarot, which I have a deck of, thanks to Mr. Jake Oddball. But yeah, the Garbage Pail Kids Tarot, which I have read exactly one time. They've got, I was on their website, well, I'm on it right now. Star Trek, The Next Generation Tarot. Trick or Treat Tarot, which incidentally I want to put that on my shopping list. That is just the kind of artwork I think I would like. Also, the Santa Muerte. Oh, that's a mini deck. I don't know if I like mini decks. Oh, the artwork is great though. But all of really Hocus Pocus. There. I didn't even like either one of the movies. I haven't even seen the second one. I didn't like the first one that much, but a bunch of you all do. So if you just want to collect tarot, or if you actually want to learn to read, they come with directions. Not that I would ever read that. But Hocus Pocus Tarot, Lord of the Rings Tarot, that's just what's on the front page of their website. They got a lot of other great items. Go check out the store. The hours are up on the screen. Closed on Mondays. They're open on Sunday afternoon. How weird is that? I've talked to the boys about that. But 10 a.m. 6 p.m. you can usually find one of them in there, but the store hours are there. Friday, Saturday. I wonder what they do when they travel. I'll have to ask them.
Close the door.
Close it. Lock it up, people. Anyway, point is, check them out. SpiritMechanics.com. Check them out online. Check them out in person. Great bunch of guys. And come to the Mystical Market and you'll see them every month. Back to my guess. The mysterious and thoughtful and well-researched Stephanie Bingham. I haven't flirted with you as much as normal, so just count your blessings. I'm becoming mature in my old age. Although,
Is that what it is?
you know, does a shorter mustache make me look younger in your opinion?
Dashing, absolutely dashing.
You're actually the first person that told me it made me look better. Everybody that says younger, in order to get out of it. So thank you for that. Okay, you kind of alluded to it when we were before the show. I'm going to ask first, what was your most surprising story that you just tripped over that maybe you didn't even have a clue about before you started? Is anything like that?
It was surprising. The UFO that hit the train.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes. That was the one that I was just like, okay. This
Continue.
one took place in Eastern Kentucky, and the train was it was a night train traveling from one location to the other, heading towards Virginia, I believe. And they came across a bridge and saw a hovering thing above the tracks in front of them. And they were saying, basically, the reports from CSX, the actual engineers' reports, were saying that that there was a light coming out of the object, like it was scanning the river looking for something. And then it essentially started affecting the train, and the train lost power.
Oh, okay.
And it couldn't stop because trains, how they work.
On a good day, they can't stop. Okay, go ahead.
Power. So all the lights went off on the train, all the computers went off, and the train slowly moving forward. And this object ends up hitting the train in the first 3, I believe, train cars, causing substantial damage. And the train was pulled off the track at the very next stop that it could get over at, the very next rail yard. And all of the cars that were involved in the accident were pulled off to the side, and the phones and documents of everyone involved were seized at that point, and the train crew was driven 6 hours away for their next pickup. So. Okay.
Few things. Just going to throw this.
Yeah.
First of all, okay, you used the word computer, so I'm assuming this was a fairly recent.
It is. It is.
Why did I not see this on Fox News?
I know, right? I believe this one was actually from the 90s, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, the 90s, 40 years ago. God,
right?
God. Anyway, now the other part of that really bothers me, they said that it looked like it was like scanning the river, but it couldn't see the fucking train. Okay. I would think it would be a universal truth that when you have 1,000 million pounds of something barreling down steel tracks at you, you would move to the side. Just saying. I would think that'd be in there like
one would think
their alien driver's education manual right next to stop signs, 4-way stops. Teach them how to do that. Get out, get out of the way. I cannot believe I've never heard that story though at all. Period. So now I know what surprised you.
Exactly. I hadn't heard a lot about that one either, and just couldn't wrap my brain around it. I've got family members that used to work on the CSX railroad, so I've heard a lot about trains as I was growing up, and I was dumbfounded.
I don't guess none of them mentioned the aliens hitting the train, though. None of your relatives.
None of them were there for that event, no,
Well,
unfortunately.
you'd think locker room talk. Basically, what I'm getting from this entire conversation, aliens are dicks. Let me get right now. They're just...
At least in Kentucky, they seem to be. There's another one that actually may or may not have led to someone's death. So, yeah.
Okay, you've teased us with it. Tell us about the aliens that killed someone.
That one is probably the most famous of the UFO encounters in the state. It happened, I believe, in the 50s, and a UFO was sighted. A fighter jet was scrambled to see what it was. They gave chase. The item went up. The fighter jet followed the gentleman who was flying. It actually lost consciousness, and his jet crashed.
I think actually made like one of those.
Made all the news.
Well, I don't know. I didn't see it on the news. I'm not that old. But I do think it made one of those documentary TV shows that talks about ancient aliens and all in 1950s. Ancient, yeah. Okay.
Prehistoric.
I still, that's gonna bother me till the day I die now that I didn't know a train hit a UFO in Kentucky.
Or the UFO hit the train.
Okay, yeah. Well, hit and run either way. There was no.
Exactly.
Now, okay, now, where did you get that information? Was that what was in the newspaper? Was that how it was described?
That one I actually found via documents talking about the plane crash, talking about other strange interactions with UFOs in Kentucky. And the more you dig, you can actually find some of the railway documents on that. Not a lot of news. There is mention of it in the news, but not a lot of detail. So you have to sort of dig some more to find anything that gives you any sort of cogent storylines. But there are a couple of books that haven't mentioned in it as well.
I don't think it would be in the newspaper. But we've already established Eastern Kentucky has apparently... Cover up.
Government cover
up. That is said a lot.
The lizard people don't want
the lizard people.
No. Yeah. Chad, over you.
Well, I'll give you an opportunity. Are there any other stories that really jumped out?
I think the story that Kentucky has that you don't really hear enough about is the Poplick Monster, the goat man in the middle of Louisville. You hear it because they have a haunted house themed for the Poplick Monster. People don't often realize that there's actually a story behind that. Supposedly, this creature will draw you out onto this train trestle in town, either mimicking a voice or having some sort of mesmeric ability with its eyes, and you end up falling prey to the train that is there. And that's one of the things people don't realize, that is an active train bridge. Multiple people have died actually trying to search for the Poplick Monster. It's a very, very dangerous cryptid to go after. But I've been to that park many times, and I can say from my personal experience, the train bridge itself does not feel nearly as odd or as strange to me as the forest, the little park directly behind it. That place is eerie, but so many people talk about this lizard man. Got lizards on the brain now. The goat man of the Poplick Trestle.
Thanks, Wes.
And I know there was recently some people injured in the last couple of years, so it's still actively going on.
Very much so. Yes, one that had, or at least one of the last ones that ended up injured and or dead, were actually going to Waverly Hills later that night and stopped by the train trestle on the way.
Yeah, I remember that story when it came out. Well, I also wanted to go back and touch on. I know we've talked a little bit about the holler stores, but I'd like to give you a chance to, for anybody who missed that seminar, to tell us a few of the gems from that presentation, because I remember that I really enjoyed this.
I think one of my favorite things in the holler tales were the ghost lights. Just hearing about that from people, because you hear the idea the further south you go of the Fifale, this spirit, this ball of light that will sort of draw you away from your house, draw you out into the swamp, and sort of lead you to your own destruction. And in the mountains, they seem to have a different version of the same story. you'll see these lights, these sort of glowing, floating orbs of light coming out of houses or down streets more often than not. And they seem to coincide with the time of someone dying. These are thought to be sort of the souls of the departed leaving, as opposed to these creatures in the swamps that would be drawing you to your death. And I find it very odd that you have this sort of juxtaposition between these two, like basically the same manifestations, but giving two completely different motivations behind them. But other than that, I really like the old thing that hollers. That was one of my favorites. I don't know if you had that story when you grew up as well, but this one was this creature that hung out near the cemetery, apparently, in this one particular holler. And they were told, the gentleman I interviewed was told that if they ever heard horse hooves, don't go outside, don't look outside. And they would find horse hoof prints basically facing the opposite direction from the sound of the thing running, as if it had backwards facing hooves. And it sounded like a woman screaming. And it was this idea of, you don't go outside when you hear this, you don't look at it. And just the idea that you could go to bed at night and hear something clopping down your street that is now paved, but sounds suddenly like gravel, and you can find, prints in the mud of what appears to be horse hooves, but going the wrong way. That one just always I found really eerie.
I've heard similar stories, but it's always interesting to hear how slightly different everything is. And like
Exactly.
you talked about the balls of lights, I think it shows the different backgrounds of different regions of the country. So further south you've got more French
Yes,
influence and stuff, and in eastern Kentucky and in the hills and Appalachian region it's Scotch and Irish, so you've got
it
kind of
is.
different historical backgrounds to give you a different folklore to draw from.
It is. And I always wondered if there was a connection between the old thing that hollers and the banshee, because I've heard reports of straight up banshees in the hollers as well. But just the idea that you don't go outside when you hear the thing start screaming always sort of lent itself to a banshee imagery, at least for me.
Yeah. And that came to mind for me too.
Yeah.
um I know and also you mentioned the caves and the Tommy knockers and that sort of thing, and certainly there's ties with a lot of that and the elemental aspects to that Scotch Irish background too. So
Always.
it's interesting how they're linked, and how you get so many stories that tie back to the old world based on cultural reference. And you wonder how much of it is the same phenomenon that's being described differently with different frames of reference.
Exactly. Cultural relativism when it comes to your spirits. It's something that I've always liked, but it's very not popular in the sort of zeitgeist of the paranormal community. But I do think that there are definite similarities, if not the same phenomena, happening across locations and across times.
Yeah. Um, we're coming up on our last break. I'm going to go ahead and toss that. We'll be back in just a moment.
Horror. Movie. Fans. For. Life. On Facebook. Find us. For watch parties. For news. For memes. For friends. For life. Horror movie fans for life. Join us.
Hey, Scarefest fans, this is Joe Lewis of Bonehead Weekly with another review. This one is called a remake, but it's if you guys remember the 2013 Evil Dead remake, it's really more of a sequel than it is a remake. And I'm going to say the same thing. This is 2022's Hellraiser. Now, Hellraiser is not been one of my favorite franchises. I enjoy the first two, and there's glimpses of things in the next two that are okay, but overall they make very little sense. And it's S&M torture porn before there was a thing. I like the idea of the demons. I like the idea of, ultimate pleasure, ultimate pain. I like all the ideas. I'd have a great story about Clive Barker. That's beside the point. Get me at one of these conventions and buy me a drink, and I'll tell you, I was just not a huge fan. So I had the bar real low on this one. Now, the movie is almost 2 hours long, and it's way too long. The acting in it is pretty bad. The writing, the dialogue's not much better. Once I got through the first 30 minutes, I started to get into it. And then by the second hour, I was pretty engrossed and actually really enjoyed this movie, Hellraiser the remake. But it's not really a remake. It's more of kind of a sequel kind of thing. I don't know, but I wouldn't call it a remake. I mean, basically, it's about a young woman who is struggling with an addiction. The plot to the Evil Dead, not remake. And she finds the puzzle box, and then there's a twist about who's good and who's bad towards the end, and I don't want to give any of that away. It's directed by David Bruckner, and you don't need to know any of that, but he directed a movie I liked a lot called The Ritual, and another movie that was okay that I've reviewed on here called The Night House, actually. Written by David Goyer, Ben Collins. It works somehow. Jamie Clayton plays the priest, and that's what she's called. She's not called Pinhead. And I like her, and I like that it's a woman this time, and I don't miss... And Doug Bradley's a fine young American. Actually, he's British. It's a fine person, but it's okay that they changed a lot of it around. A lot of it's silly. Don't think about it too much. Like a lot of these movies, just don't think about it. I like the look. I just... The first 30, 40 minutes was rough for me to get through. It's just so bad. The acting was just so bad. And I was like, this director's better than this. And then the last hour and 20 minutes, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I don't know why, but it's engrossing. And then it has an ending that kind of takes you there. And it doesn't really pull it really lays the gas down, and it doesn't really pull back. And then it takes it into a few places. Really, I would say the plot overall, and I've seen this a lot, and it's true, is a combination of Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2. There's a lot of references to Hellraiser 2 in it, and there's a lot of where you can point and go, oh, this is straight out of Hellraiser 2. But the updating of the Cenobites, it all works, and I don't really have a problem with this movie. In fact, probably makes just as much sense as the first Hellraiser, if not more. I liked it. I did. I liked it. I know Clive Barker had a hand in this one quite a bit. I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would. And like I said, for me, the first 30 minutes, it's just torture. But once you get past that, it's okay. And I liked a lot of the character. No, not really. I really just like the Cenobites. Don't so much. There's a bad guy character in it, and I kind of understand him, although his decisions are stupid. And can be said for a lot of horror films. So, Hellraiser is on Hulu. If you have Hulu, you can watch it with your subscription. I do recommend it, actually. I recommend it. And I think Jamie Clayton brought something. And the director, David Bruckner, brought something different to it. It's kind of, like I said, a combination of Hellraiser 1 and Hellraiser 2. So check out 2022's Hellraiser on Hulu. It's been Joe Lewis of Bonehead Weekly.
And welcome back, everybody, to the final segment of Scarefest TV for this evening. So we're going to kind of do a review here, talk about some stuff. Okay. The theme tonight is stay off railroad tracks, obviously. And aliens are dicks. Now, you know what? The little ball of light thing, though, I've seen that phenomena. Yeah. It was it's actually just across the road from where we live now, over in the woods. I have no idea what it was. I watched for a while. I thought maybe got the flashlight or a lantern, but it was just a little ball of light kind of danced around. I did not go investigate it because that would have involved me walking all the way over there, and I don't do that.
Could it have been your soul leaving?
Well, at least part of it, the good part, who knows? That just occurred to me, listening to the story. I was watching something earlier today about pyramids, and I'm like, why do I watch this shit? And I realized I'm never going to go there because I'm not walking up 300 foot of stairs. Just, it's not going to happen. So, I don't know why I threw that in there, but, okay, let's see here. Oh, and now going back on one of your points, I did have a guy try to convince me, I guess you could say convince me, his belief system was that the reason Kentucky has all this weird phenomenon and is so haunted is because we have all these sinkholes. And he was convinced that every one of them was just a gateway to hell.
Well, we're screwed.
I mean, that's a belief.
It is, yes, it is.
Limestone and cave systems.
Yes. And water. Don't forget water.
Yeah.
But I'll put it this way. Okay, my immediate area, and now here I claim to be psychic. If nothing else, I try to keep my ears open for the ghost stories. Now, we're out of Bingham County, no sinkholes, plenty of ghost stories. Where I live now, no ghost stories. None. Except in Cynthia. Okay, yeah. But, so.
Could it be that you're repelling the ghost stories?
Repel other people? Why the hell not? What is on the horizon now that you've covered ghosts, you've covered vampires, and okay, now wait a minute, I'm going to back up. Arguably, the mermaid story. What was the most conventional cryptid story? Because we've talked about most of this stuff's pretty fucking weird. Being like hitting a UFO with a train, but did anything? That's how I'll ask it. What was the most mundane cryptid story you came across?
The most mundane cryptid story I came across in the state of Kentucky had to do with some of the first settlers that came through Cumberland Gap into the state. There were reports of, at the time, them finding 2 to 3 foot long pink salamanders.
Well, I'll give you that. It's mundane. Do we have such things? I mean,
there is not record of it, but that is a coloration that happens in smaller salamanders in the area. So there's the idea that there may have at one time been giant versions of these in certain areas that were killed out quickly, kind of like the hellbenders.
Okay, yeah, I know what those are because I watched the hunting show that's on Sunday morning. Kentucky Afield.
Oh,
Kentucky Afield. They were yanking them things out from under rocks, and I'm like, you need a better hobby. Okay, I can see that. Apparently didn't like the white man stomping through the woods and gave up and died. Okay.
Or they were easy to kill and were eaten.
Another possibility. I mean, did they in the accounts? Did they just talk about seeing them, or did they give recipes? I mean, and that's an Eastern Kentucky thing. Admit it.
Yes. There were no recipes given, but they were seen enough that they were thought to probably have been hunted if they were actual animals.
Yeah. I love these. You meant if they actually existed. I'm assuming,
yes.
Not if they were actual animals,
yes.
Because then we're back to the lizard people thing, and that just makes
not tiny lizard people, no.
Chad, you need to bail me out of this. I'm just going down a dark spot. Stephanie? Is this the most fun you ever had on any podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Hands down.
That's
no question.
My life is complete.
I love that for you.
I'm going to ask a more conventional question. What do we have coming down the pike? Do you have any projects or anything that you're working on that you want to share?
I have the one that is out currently is the Feminine Macabre Volume 4. You will find in there my article on the Dancing Lady of Lawrenceburg. If you're looking for some strange historical accounts, that's in there. I do have a couple of things that I'm currently working on, but I can't quite say exactly what, but that is why I was only at Scarefest for one day. So should be something very exciting coming very soon.
So we all should monitor your social media to see what's coming soon.
Yes.
Or just to watch for cat pictures.
Always the cat pictures.
I I want to follow up on the why you termed the Dancing Lady of Lawrenceburg, not knowing the story because I do zero research. Why'd you say macabre? A dancing lady doesn't say macabre.
That's the name of the book.
Oh. Well, I thought in the description of what there was something about that story that.
Well, she's dead, and she died while dancing. It's why she's known as the Dancing Lady. She died in a man's arms and turned out to not be who she said she was, and she still remains unidentified to this point. And there's a haunting and possibly a murder associated with the whole story. So
okay, I've never had.
I look forward to that.
I've never had that happen, Chad.
Lady die while dancing
right.
with you?
Now, I mean, I've almost had a heart attack or two, but stroke out right on the dance floor because, you know. Anyway.
It's good. It's a good record.
So I'm assuming that in future we can look for some of these type topics coming up in your speeches because you've done more. You've already done more New Orleans out. Let's just leave that out of next. You could, if you did one about vampires, you had to bring that. I'm sure that was mentioned.
Well, I've never done one about vampires at Scarefest.
Oh, I thought you did one. Well, there you go. The teaser.
I could do that one.
We've got plenty of Kentucky vampires to draw off of, so.
Oh, we do. That we do.
Really?
Yeah.
Like flesh-eating vampires, or just the ones that suck your life out of your soul?
Flesh-eating, like zombies?
Well, bite your neck and
the Murray vampires.
The Murray vampires are the most famous, absolutely.
Well, see, now we even if you don't do a topic on it, we're just going to have an entire show because I did not know, honestly. Okay, I did not know that vampires were a thing in Kentucky. Although it doesn't surprise me with my whole everything centers in Kentucky. But,
hey, Wes, thanks for coming to my seminar presentations because I did one on the vampires from Kentucky.
No, wait a minute. The only one I remember you doing was that the boys that they might have ate people. I don't know. The ones down the Tennessee line.
Boys from Murray, Kentucky, who were vampires.
Oh, they weren't vampires. They were misguided youths.
They claim to be vampires.
And they did actually consume blood.
Fair amount.
But did they turn into bats or anything cool like that?
No, but they killed people.
Well, lots of people kill people. I think, never mind. Just saying. Well, we've ran the hour out, people, just like a marathon runner with his butt on fire. So, next week we're talking serial killers to give a little teaser out there to Scarefest World. We're talking serial killer psychology. And Jeff Ignatowski is coming on to tell us all about his study and his experiences. And basically he sells is that a card game or board game? Anybody pay attention? I think it's a card game. And the crowd goes wild. Okay, everybody. But that's Scarefest next week. This week, this has been Stephanie Bingham. Stephanie, as always, thank you so much for coming on and brightening my day.
Thank you for having me.
Chad?
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're still not fired.